Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Ella Čolić is a student at Occidental College in California with a book out called Trees Without Roots. The book highlights what her family went through during the Bosnian War. A few months ago, she went back to Bosnia to support the My First Book Festival. And in collaboration with the Bosanka Media Group and the publishing agency Tulza, she became an ambassador for this project that inspires young people to publish their first book. With the proceeds from her Bosnian translation of Trees Without Roots and her additional sponsorship, BMG published a book called Bosnian Child, which was a collection of poetry and words written by a young boy who unfortunately was killed during the war. Ella hopes that the work she does now will encourage young people to write and help other authors to begin their careers as writers. I had a wonderful chat with Ella. She really is an inspiration. She is only 20 years old, but has already achieved a lot, has already travelled abroad, written her book, worked with other people to experience what is out in the world and the fact that everybody lives very differently and that everybody's stories deserve to be told. So it was fascinating to learn how the idea to write about her family's Bosnian story started, then how she wrote it, and what she took into consideration as she wrote it. And then we talk about the My First Book Festival, her role with that, and why she's so passionate about it. So if you have any connection with Bosnia or the Balkans, this may be a really interesting listen for you. And if you're writing a memoir or a family history piece, again, I think this will be a really interesting read for you and give you some ideas on how you can pull your family history together. Well, Ella, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to learn more about the many projects that you're involved with, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later in our conversation. But I wonder if we could just start off with you telling us about your own journey to writing, how that happened for you.
For sure. First all, thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And for that one, it is a little bit of a long story, so I'll try my best to keep it as short and sweet as possible. But essentially, when I was 16 years old on Thanksgiving Day, so I believe this is about 2018 now, we finished having our meal. You know, the American tradition, like everyone has a giant meal together. We all sit around the table and just talk, catch up on each other's lives and whatnot. And so I'm helping clean up by putting some dishes away. And my aunt just comes up to me and she hands me this pink envelope. And at first I'm confused because, you know, for Thanksgiving, it's not tradition to give gifts. And I was the only one that received an envelope. So I was thinking, why me? And I'm trying to figure out what it is. So I'm looking at everyone around the room and everyone's just staring at me in silence. They're just waiting for my reaction to open up this envelope. So I carefully open it because it is very fragile. Like some of the folds are already tearing apart. It's a little bit like there's water staining on some edges here and there. So I open it up and all of a sudden, all these letters fall out in front of me. There's some envelope or some letters that have like kisses on them, some of them that have some pressed flowers. So I'm delicately holding all these letters, trying to read the writing of it. And then I realized that these were letters that my father and aunt wrote when they went through the war. My father was 16 years old when the war happened, and my aunt was only 11. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see the parallels of me being 16 years old, receiving the letters, and my father being 16 and living through the war. And as I'm reading it, I thought it would be interesting to write a book about it because my family, we're mixed religious and mixed ethnic. So that means that I come from a Muslim and Orthodox family, and I identify as both. And I haven't read many books that have a perspectives from Bosnian refugees that are mixed religious themselves. So I thought that um, it would be an interesting project, not only to learn more about my own identity, but to also teach others about what it means to come from a multi-religious society and background, and also to hopefully inspire other people to write about their own identity as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fascinating. And so how did that show up? Those two different sides of your family, how did that show up in day-to-day life? For example, did you observe the religious traditions for both sides, or did your parents get to pick and choose which ones they wanted? How did that work?
So there was always a reason to celebrate in our household. It was really funny because I would joke around with my friends. I would have 2 Christmases, 2 Easters, 2 New Years because of Christianity and Orthodox religions, because I did have some Christians in my family as well. And then we also celebrated Eid and some other Islamic religions here and there. So it was always celebrations going on.
Oh, that's lovely. Do you know, it reminds me of my uncle's village. So I'm half Indian, and in India, my uncle's village, it was very diverse, and there was Christians, Muslims, and Sikhs there, and they had a temple for every all 3 religions. And we think of them as being very opposite one another and not living harmoniously, but just like you were saying, it just meant in the village there was always a celebration going on, meant there was always good times, and which shows that kind of that mix, that diversity can be so positive. It doesn't need to be the source of antagonism, does it? It can be a good thing. So that led to, presumably, those beautiful letters led you to Trees Without Roots, and telling that story about what your family went through in the Bosnian War. So knowing that you're only one generation away from this, because did they leave Bosnia when they were that young? I mean, when did they go to the States?
So they did end up, my father was here in 1998 in the United States. So it was a little bit after the war happened, because they did move quite frequently. So sometimes they would go from Bosnia to Croatia, back to Bosnia, and then they went to Germany, but then their temporary protection status expired. So the only 2 options they had were to either go back home to Bosnia or go to America. And they thought that there was nothing left for them in Bosnia because it was a post-war situation. Mm-hmm. And the country was still recovering from what happened. So they decided to come to America in 1998. So it was very, very recent.
So was that before you were born, or had you been born?
Yeah, that was 4 years before I was born.
Okay. So, yeah. So that's only one generation away, and feasibly you could have been born there and experienced a bit of that post-war Bosnia yourself. So how does it feel hearing these stories or reading about these stories, knowing that they're so close to you and so close to your family?
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting experience, more in the sense that when I was younger, I would ask a lot about our background because, like I've said, I had a very vague idea as to why we came here. So I did know that they did go through different countries quite a bit and that they were refugees from war, but I didn't necessarily understand the quote unquote burden of being coming from a multi-religious family and of the tensions that came with it and all the struggles. So reading those letters, I'm fortunate enough to have this opportunity. Yes, there were so many difficult conversations that took place, but I really value those difficult conversations because now I have a better understanding as to, everything that happened. And also, I think in a way, since I learned about my background and saw how rich it was, even minor things like celebrating so many holidays, it just shows that it goes much deeper than just, being a refugee.
Oh, so much more. Yeah, there's this whole history that our parents have that we don't sometimes we can't even imagine that they've had these lives before we were born. And so what a unique opportunity for you to see them, not just as your parents, but as individuals who have been through something very, very big, very traumatic and part of history as well. So your aunts gave you the letters. How did your father feel about you being given these letters? And when you decided to write about them, turn it into fiction, or turn it into a book, was he open to that? Was that something he was happy to talk to you about?
So this is some behind the scenes knowledge that I didn't know until after I published my book. But apparently my aunt and my mom, they were talking a lot and they were debating about whether or not they should even hand me the envelope in the first place, because they were worried that I wouldn't be emotionally mature enough to handle it, because it is a really intense topic. It is children talking about the war situation and witnessing death all around them. So they were just worried that me, someone who grew up in California for most of my life and essentially lived in this bubble, they thought that it wouldn't be something that I could handle. But after much convincing, my mom told my aunt that, she's ready, she should read them. So my aunt, she was an open book at first. Like, she was ready to talk about everything that happened. But my dad on the other side was really hesitant to tell me his perspective, which I understand because, I am his daughter and he wants to protect me in that way. But after I think it was like about 2 years of interviewing him, that's when he finally opened up and was comfortable with sharing stories. And I do want to add that before they would talk like some stories here and there, but it was more towards the comical side. Like they remember like, oh, I remember being in this band in Croatia and whatnot, which I talk a little bit about in the book. But going into the psychological and emotional trauma, that definitely took a really, really long time with him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can totally imagine. I mean, he was 16 at the time, and I imagine being a young man, there could have been a lot of pressure on him to be part of that, to join up, to go and fight as well. So I could imagine there'd be a lot of inner turmoil for him and trying to decide what the best thing to do is. And yeah, as you say, sort of seeing death and destruction all around them, that is going to have a very big impact on the psyche of anybody, let alone children and teenagers. So I can understand why he was reluctant. And I think for us, growing up, as you say, in a peaceful country where there isn't a civil war going on, it's hard for us to imagine what that is like living day to day. Obviously, we're seeing a bit more of it in the press at the moment with what's going on in the Ukraine, but I would imagine, going back to that time, reliving that time, recounting it to you would be very, very tough. Does he sort of appreciate why it's so important now? Does he understand what a contribution he's made in helping you write this book?
Oh yeah, most definitely. He does see the contribution because he deeply believes that the truth will always go out there no matter how long it's been. So even though they've held these stories in them for like over 20 years, almost 30 years at this point, he does see a lot of value, and he thinks that it definitely did strengthen our bond between each other, because now I have a better understanding as to, why he does the things that he does and like why he is the way he is. And then it also gives me appreciation for everything that he has done for our family too. So there's that as well.
Yeah, some really big choices, difficult choices. And so has it impacted your life? Now that you have all this knowledge and more understanding, has it impacted the way that you see the world now and how you move in the world?
I think it has definitely opened my perspective about things, because like I've mentioned, I was in this bubble in the sense that I was only worrying about grades in school, which I was very privileged to only have those concerns about getting good grades and whatnot. And then reading these letters and seeing the exact opposite side, where my father, he's the same age as me, but he has to worry about providing for my aunt, which is his sister, and for the rest of the family, because my grandpa, he was a general for the test brigade, and my grandma started off as a triage nurse on the front lines. So they were there fighting, and they were away from my father and aunt for a majority of the war. So seeing my father having at such a young age mature so quickly and trying to take on that kind of like fatherly role from a really young age, that definitely, like, it's really hard to explain, but something just like clicked in my brain. And that's just when it, like, everything like kind of expanded in a way for me. So yeah, it definitely gave me a better appreciation for things that I definitely took for granted.
And did you sort of feel yourself kind of mature almost more quickly than you might have done, or not? Just having that kind of more understanding about yeah, well, no, just because we can live in, if I think about my own life, living in this lovely bubble of security and things, and thinking that life is always rosy. I wonder if having that outside very real perspective kind of can kind of make you just a little bit of more maturity than one might have done normally.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been fascinated with topics about like war situations. So I've definitely read a lot of stories that have stemmed from this idea. But I do think it was really different seeing it come from such a personal level because, like you've said, this is only like a one generation difference. It's only 4 years after they came to America that, you know, I'm here now. So I do think that it did definitely make me more mature in the sense that and like the emotional side that I could like feel their pain and and suffering and just generally like be fascinated by how they're able to overcome that so quickly with such little support. Because once they came to America, that's it. Like they just have to start working, learn the language. They don't have time to go to therapy or to sit back and try to figure out like what happened and, you know, ponder about their emotions. So, and that's why I joked and said that it did make me feel a little bit immature in the sense that, you know, I'm 16 and I'm still living with my parents. I don't have a clue about the world or anything like that. So I do think that taking on a big project such as writing a book, it definitely did show that I was trying to be a bit more mature and get that message out there as well.
Yeah, it's the emotional side, isn't it? That must have an impact and change. And gosh, yes, when you put it like that, you know, that your dad and your aunt came to the States, there's no navel gazing going on. There's no looking for the deeper meaning in this and going to get therapy. It's I've got to learn to speak the language first of all, and then I've got to get a job and I've got to pay some rent and I've just got to survive.
Exactly.
That is hard. That is hard. So with that in mind, kind of knowing this is your first book, first of all, that you're writing about a big topic, serious topic, and a lot of emotional trauma going on behind the scenes with it, how did you approach writing it? Did you decide, do you know what, I'm going to do this just from beginning to end and write it in a linear fashion, and whose sort of point of view did you decide to tell it from? How did you work out those kind of details?
So my mom hates when I say the story all the time because she thinks it paints in a bad light, but it really isn't. She thought that I was joking when I said I was going to write a book because you know how young kids, they always say like, oh, like I'm going to write a book, and then they write a few chapters here and there, but never do. So she didn't expect me to like fully complete the project, which understandable because if I had a kid who was 16 and saying that they're going to write a book about war at such a young age without experiencing it firsthand, I'd also be like, yeah, right. Like, let's see that happen. But she did believe in me and she did offer me support no matter what, because, you know, that's what parents do, or like good parents do, which I'm really thankful that I had that kind of support. But, you know, being 16 and never having taken on such a project like this, I'll be honest, I didn't really have like any idea as to what I was exactly doing. I did try my best to organize it in the most logical and coherent fashion. So I started off by making a timeline of events based off of the letters itself. So I would read the letters and then I would pick the ones that I found most interesting because there were about 50 letters and I believe I only incorporated about 20 in my book. So just that was like the first step, like, okay, which content am I going to use? And then once I found the letters that I really liked, I began transcribing them online because some of them, they did have like water damage. And so the ink was fading away. So first transcribed that. And then with my dad's help and my aunt's help, because they wrote the letters themselves. And if I couldn't read the word, they would help me translate it from Bosnian to English. And then I think that was a little bit of a too, because like I said, they are kids. So sometimes their grammar is a little bit off, or sometimes the spelling is slightly like different. And then they also like to use colored pens a lot, but over time, because it's not blue or black ink, over time it kind of fades away. So then you can't really see it that well. But my aunt still remembered pretty vividly everything that she wrote, which I found pretty impressive. That she was able to remember from so long ago what she was able to like detail in those letters exactly. And then the research aspect itself, it was fairly straightforward because there is a lot of information online that I could easily access to give like background and context. But when it came, I didn't want it to have like a historical focus. That was the one thing. I wanted to have it be more personal and to humanize their stories instead of them merely just being a statistic like, oh, 1.1 million refugees fled from Bosnia. I wanted to give more of an emotional aspect to it. So I put a heavy emphasis on interviews throughout the process. And for that part, if I had any specific questions about the letters, I would focus the interview question on that. But I wanted to get more of their opinion rather than just simply what has happened. So I made a set of questions, and they were pretty similar for one another. And I interviewed them at separate occasions because I didn't want the presence of like one or the other to influence what their answer is. I just wanted to be their raw emotion. So that aspect was definitely the longest part because it took that while to gain their trust. It took a while to actually have them believe that this project was going to be something that was actually going to happen. And then the time to overcome the hesitancy of opening up to someone who's so young and who has never lived through war themselves. Like, there's all these challenges that I had to face. But once I did get the interviews, I transcribed that online because I didn't want to type as I was recording them. I wanted to be engaged in the conversation. So listen back, transcribe everything on my Google Docs. And then after that, I would pick out the excerpts that I thought were the most impactful and then weave that into the story. So to answer your question, I write from both perspectives. I write from both my father's and aunt's, and then sometimes I throw in my own narrative as well, just to give my own opinion too, especially when it came to the family dynamic. I thought it would be interesting to weave in how the family dynamic was back then and how it is nowadays and how I see it from someone who is one generation away from what has happened. Mm-hmm. So I know that was a little bit wordy, but I hope that did answer your question.
Yes, no, it did, absolutely, because there'll be people listening who want to record their own family history as well and want to put that down. And so, you know, sharing your experience and how you approached it will give them inspiration and ideas for how they can do theirs as well.
Yeah, the easiest thing, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
The easiest thing is just to have it be most logical in a time sense if you are writing about your family story, because even when in times where I didn't know where I wanted to go with it, I could just look at my timeline and then pick an event and work ahead of it instead of having to write just from start to end. So I think that was the most helpful advice I could give.
And so what do you think the message behind your book is, or what do you think is what you've learned from their story? I mean, if you were to say that there is a message or a theme behind the book, what do you think it might be?
There's a lot that you can take away from this because it is coming from a child's perspective. So there is no like political agenda or propaganda behind it. It is just the raw emotion, because kids, they always reflect the environment that they're in or what the parents or adults around them are feeling and expressing. So for them, but like they didn't understand why this was happening. They didn't understand the political nature behind why coming from a mixed religious background that was no longer a uniting force, but rather now a dividing force. So I think it just shows that learning about your identity, it can be really powerful in the sense that not only you get a better understanding of yourself, but also you can connect to people from many different backgrounds. So while I did know I am Muslim and Orthodox, learning more about the war, it helped me really resonate with the people from the former Yugoslavian countries. And the thing that I am mostly inspired by were the people's reactions once my book came out, because there were so many other people from mixed religious backgrounds that came up to me and they were thanking me for writing it because they no longer felt alone. So that's something I really took to heart.
Yeah, that is. And I think that is one of the reasons we turn to biography and memoir particularly, is to kind of see ourselves reflected and just exactly as you say, not to feel so alone and know that there are others experiencing something similar to us. So your book has been published in Bosnia and you've just returned from there. Has it been well received there? How are people sort of perceiving it being told from an American perspective almost? Because you've got your own narrative in there. And then how did that trip to Bosnia? I don't know if you've been back, you know, growing up, if you had holidays there, but how was that experience?
So I think overall it was really well received, mostly because I am bringing back this conversation to light 30 years later. And my main goal was to give an opportunity for other people from the area to talk about their story and what they went through, and not to just forget about it. Because even though, like I said, it is a really difficult conversation to have, it is important to keep talking about it so that we don't forget what happened, and to not have instances like this repeat, which is unfortunate to say now in regards to what's happening with Russia, Ukraine. But hopefully one day we will learn from our mistakes, and moving forward, we will make some sort of changes. So I am optimistic for that. But yeah, I think it was well received. And the proceeds for my Bosnian copy, it goes to the festival that I'm currently working on, which we will definitely talk about a little bit later. I'm not quite sure I don't want to jump ahead in your questions. But yeah, I think it was just like they appreciated that we're still talking about it, and it's not just some sort of forgotten history.
So important. Yes, so important. And so a big part of what you do and why you do what you do is you want to inspire a younger generation of writers coming up. So which books have inspired you, you know, as you've been growing up? Who has been the inspiration that made you think, I could do this too, I could write this book?
I think my inspiration was more, okay, I'm going to say The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch, but not in the sense that I was thinking I could do it and write a book, but more in the philosophical sense that okay, I'll have to give some context because it's really hard to explain. But essentially, if you don't know what his book is about, it is this professor at Carnegie Mellon. He only had a few months left to live. So he gave a last lecture series that basically told you how to live out your childhood dreams. So when I was younger, I definitely did want to write. I was really passionate about writing. I would write poems here and there. I went to some young author contests and whatnot. So I really enjoyed writing. And I didn't necessarily expect that I was going to write a book. I didn't have it planned long term that this was something I wanted to do. But after reading that book, especially the quote where he said, "Brick walls aren't there to keep you out. They're there to show you how badly you want something." I strongly resonate with that. And it made me feel like I could do anything that I wanted to do, which seems a little bit naive coming from a really young perspective, because I feel like a lot of young people have that sentiment that they feel like they can do anything that they want to do and that they're unstoppable, which is good. It's nothing bad, but I'm just saying that it's just something that I noticed a lot of young people have, which is something that they should keep going forward. But I was kind of in that rut where, I'm about to finish high school or halfway through high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do in the future. And then I get this opportunity with the letters, and, that's just how it led. One thing led to another. I got inspired by this book and the quote, and then I got those letters. And then that was the moment I figured, hey, I should write a book about it, pursue something that I'm passionate about while also learning more about myself at the same time, and then hopefully inspire other people as well.
Yay. Oh, that's wonderful. And what a great resource to come across, or what a great lecture series to come across at just the right age. And I think, yeah, absolutely, we should strive for our dreams. If we don't strive for them, then we can't even get close to them. So even if we don't hit that ultimate goal, we're going to get closer to it than we ever would have done if we didn't try. And exactly, that's something I'm often saying to the writers in my community, who haven't yet finished that first novel. You've got to go for it. You've got to try. And maybe I should incorporate this as well. We capture that passion of your youth and that belief that we had in our youth, and carry it on now into, as we're all getting a bit older.
Yeah.
Stick with it, because we all do need somebody to give us that little word of encouragement, like that quote that you gave us. And I am sure that there will be lines in your book, there'll be things that you say that people coming up behind you, right, young writers coming up behind you, will resonate with and cling to, and that will be what they need to write their first book as well, which I would love to chat with you about now, because you are passionately sort of encouraging young people to write their books. And I wonder if you'd tell us a little bit about this wonderful festival that you are involved in called the My First Book Festival. It had its inaugural season last year, and this year is its second year. So could you tell us a little bit more about it and who it's for, and who can be part of it?
I would gladly love to talk about this. So, the proceeds of the Bosnian translation of my book goes directly to this organization. It has been created by the publisher I have in Bosnia, BMG Tulza. And I'm an ambassador for the project because last year my book helped financially sponsor several books, and one of them being Bosansko Dijete by Enes Hodžić, which means Bosnian child. And essentially his story, he was 13 years old when he got hit by a grenade in front of his home, and unfortunately him and his cousin passed away. But the teachers at his school ended up finding poems that he wrote in his school desk about the war. So it was very parallel to what my message of the book is as well, just showing that children, they only reflect the fear around them. They don't necessarily understand the political climate. It's only what they are taught throughout the years, but it's something that definitely can be either learned or unlearned depending on which way you go about it. But it was a really powerful and impactful story. And then we even premiered a documentary about his life just because he was an incredibly talented kid. And it was just unfortunate to see war take away such young lives like that. So that happened last year, and I was a spokesperson for that. I helped give the awards to the winners of the competition. And now we're hoping that it will create some sort of domino effect. So the proceeds of, or part of the proceeds of these publications that were recently published, it will go on to help publish the next set of winners. And that our main goal is to help promote literacy among the youth, but also to inspire people of any age to write as well. So there are 4 different age categories. Anyone of any age can apply, and from any country as well. It just has to be an unpublished manuscript. And like you've mentioned, we are having our second festival this coming December. So I believe either publication or submissions are about to open. So if you are interested, you can contact my publisher at BMG Tulza, either on Facebook or Instagram. And you if it's a language that's not in Bosnian, that's okay too, because we have had some German transcripts that came in. And you may have the opportunity to work with this wonderful young lady named Azra Pargan. She helped me translate my English version into Bosnian as well. Extremely talented, and she's one of those people that gives me hope that change will happen in the future for young people.
Oh, it's one exciting project to be part of and to be at the beginning of, to see the foundation of this happen. So the festival's happening in December. Probably by the time this episode goes out, submissions will be open, and I will link to the Facebook and Instagram accounts of BMG.
Okay, wait. Oh, sorry. One correction for that then. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but if this is coming out in December, then I believe submissions would have closed by then, which is really unfortunate.
But the festival is in December.
Yes, festivals in December.
And
but
submissions are about to open?
Yeah. Yes, in September.
In September, okay. And when do they close?
It closes a month before the festival begins because we have judges and selecting winners. Sorry about that. I just needed to clarify.
No, that's fine. So submissions are not submissions have opened. By the time this episode goes out, they will still be open, and then the festival is in December, and it's open to all languages, not just Bosnian, and to all ages. And is there is there a theme, a topic for submissions, or can people write about any topic?
You can write about any topic. We've had some romance novels that won last year, but then we also had topics like Bosansko Dijete, which is more of like a war-focused poetry. So it could literally be about anything as long as you do have emotion and feel to it, and it is something that you are extremely passionate about, because I do believe that if you're passionate about it, it will convey through your writing.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for telling us about that. I'll make sure I link to those in the show notes. And so you've written this first book. You're very busy with the festival. Are you finding any time to write your second book? Are you going to be switching over to fiction, or are you going to be using the letters you didn't use first time to do a second book? What's happening with you?
Currently, at the moment, I'm working on some research papers for school, which is a very different field than historical nonfiction, but it is an interesting type of medium to explore. But I do want to work on a second project kind of stemming off of the book, but to have a different medium. So I was thinking more about focusing on photography, but there will also be, of course, text that's affiliated with it, just not as extensive as a 300-page book. But we will see, because that's currently in the works. And yeah,
that's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I can see that you are a woman who's going to go far, lots of ideas and ambition, and crucially, you're doing it. You're not just dreaming about it and thinking about it. You're actually doing it and getting involved, which tells me you have a very, very bright future ahead of you.
Thank you.
Tell us, where can listeners find out more about you and your book?
I have a website, www.treeswithoutroots.com, altogether lowercase. Facebook, you can find me, Ella Čolić. I should be the top result. And then on Instagram, I am ella.čolić. But if you want to see my business page, it is just Trees Without Roots on Instagram.
Okay.
Together, lowercase.
I'll link to those as well. That's wonderful. Ella, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, getting to know all the things that you're up to. And I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much.
If you're a first-time novelist who is struggling to either finish your novel or get those revisions to where you want them to be, then I've got just the thing for you. I have a small group coaching program which runs over 12 months, and over the course of that program I will help you fix those plot problems that you've been struggling with. I'll help you get under the surface of your characters so you really get to know them and what's driving them. And crucially for you, I give you that self-belief that you need to get you through the roller coaster that is writing a novel, so that you can carry on, get to the end, and get your book, your story out into the world so it can change people's lives. If that sounds good to you, if that is something that you'd be interested in doing, I know I can help you get to where you want to be. So book a call with me. Let's have a chat and see if we are a good fit for each other. If you're interested in doing that, then go to emmadesi.com/story builder. I look forward to chatting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.